Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining today. We appreciate the time you've taken to participate in this session with us. I am here on behalf of Circular Action Alliance, CAA, the producer responsibility organization under SB54 in California. Today's presentation will focus on the covered cost methodology and payment mechanism that we're developing to ensure that local governments and service providers are fairly reimbursed for new and additional costs incurred to comply with the law accordingly. Just a few reminders about today's session. It is recorded, and we ask that you please ask questions throughout the webinar in the chat function, and then at the end we will open up for a live Q&A. So when the time comes for that, please go ahead and just use the raise hand feature and we will call on you. We will also be providing the webinar materials at the end, and we will have contact information included in that package, so if you have any follow-up questions after the webinar. So our objectives today are fivefold. We will start with a quick overview of SB54 and CAA's role in its implementation. Then we'll introduce the covered cost methodology and the payment mechanism, which are two key components that will determine how reimbursement works. We will also walk you through the data collection process that's currently underway and explain how this data supports our work. We'll clarify how local governments and service providers are expected to participate and benefits to participating. And finally, we want to make space for your questions and to hear your feedback. We understand this is a crucial part of the whole entire process. So that being said, to open it up, we would love to hear from you in the chat. Why did you join this webinar today, and what changes or improvements do you want to see in recycling systems? So go ahead and input that information in the chat, and in the meantime, I will go ahead and transition over to my colleague, Susan Robinson.
Excellent. Thank you, Katie. And thanks for those of you who are on the call. I know it was late notice for some of you, and we appreciate you taking the time in some cases at the last minute. This has been a fast-moving process, and we're excited about where we are and where we're going. And we hope that this is just the first of many conversations that you're going to be having with this team as we all work to implement California's packaging law, SB54. So I actually said this out loud, I think, for the first time today. SB54 is known as the Plastic Pollution Prevention and Packaging Producer Responsibility Act. I challenge you to say that 10 times fast. I think it should be the 6P Act, quite frankly. And I'm curious to know if others have run into that before. The law sets really ambitious goals for 2032. First, it covers all covered materials must be recyclable or compostable by 2032. And the covered list is long. It includes most of what's in our blue bin, as well as other single-use and packaging-related materials. Also, 100% of single-use packaging and plastic foodware have to be recyclable. And finally, at least 65% of single-use packaging and foodware must actually be recycled into new products. So I know many of you have spent a lot of time on this and are fully aware of it, but I think it's always a good reminder to establish really what the basic fundamental goals of the Act are. So importantly as well, instead of adding costs to ratepayers to achieve these goals, which I think we are all sensitive to, SB54 shifts that increased cost of complying with the law from local governments and ratepayers directly onto producers. And CAA is the California Producer Responsibility Organization and is tasked with ensuring that these new costs are clearly identified and fully funded by producers, reducing the financial pressures on your companies and on your customers. Among the many requirements that SB54 places on producers, there are two critical components that we're going to focus on this call today. CAA is required to develop a methodology for determining eligible covered costs. This includes a transparent framework to identify what new and additional costs are eligible for reimbursement and to develop guidance for that process. And then also a payment mechanism. CAA will be developing a streamlined system for timely distribution of funds from producers directly to you and to local jurisdictions. This will include the use of an online portal to cover as many of those details as possible, as efficiently as possible. So CAA is currently developing these two frameworks as central elements of that program plan that is required to be submitted to CalRecycle in 2026. And I always think of the program plan as somewhat of an operations plan, quite frankly, as we're all familiar with from work with in local communities. So having accurate data for these frameworks is foundational to the funding process. To collect the data, we're launching surveys to gather that information that's needed to comply with the requirements in the statute. So CAA's legal mandate is very clear under SB54. CAA must establish a transparent, fair, and practical reimbursement process and budget framework that accurately captures and funds net new and additional expenses. To meet the obligations, the current data collection initiative is focused on, first, establishing reliable and accurate baseline costs for 2022. Clearly identifying incremental costs directly attributable to SB54 implementation. And third, developing a transparent payment process that is fair, practical, and defensible, ensuring that your company gets the funding that it needs. So there are two key documents that are required in the statute that influence our work. The first is CAA's program plan. Again, this is required by SB54 and it's due from CAA to CalRecycle in mid-2026. It details a lot. It details how CAA will achieve compliance with the law, including payment methodologies, educational initiatives, source reduction strategies, and overall budgets and fees. And the second one is the needs assessment. This is also required in the law, and it's CalRecycle is responsible for the needs assessment. It's being developed by HF&H and HDR and provides a high-level snapshot of recycling systems and infrastructure gaps across the state. The CalRecycle needs assessment will help inform CAA's planning process. However, CAA's methodology is what will provide the detailed and actionable approach needed for jurisdiction level cost coverage. Our reimbursement strategy involves 4 interconnected work streams. The first is on the left, the covered cost payment administrative process. So this is the mechanics about how the system will manage and process funding applications. Then in the center, you'll see 2 work streams. The first is a 2022 baseline cost assessment for collection and MRF operations. And the second is an analysis of anticipated new and additional costs. And this is where your input is going to be extremely critical, really what we're focused on today. Finally, there's also a systems optimization and material strategy effort, which will assess how CAA can best manage covered materials efficiently across the state and to assess system changes to support the needs of SB54. The data collection we're focusing on today directly informs, again, that work stream 2 and 3, and where we're hoping we can get as much feedback from you and involvement as we can to really make this go smoothly. You know, the program implements in 2027, and there's only a 5-year window for achieving these really aggressive goals. So it's really going to be coming out of the block strong, which really is important to be doing a lot of this work early on. So I want to pause here on the next, go ahead, Katie, you can go ahead and forward it. I want to pause here to acknowledge that we're very aware that there have been other surveys and questionnaires coming your way from different organizations. CAA's survey is a necessary process specifically targeted to meet regulatory requirements under SB54. It's narrowly tailored to gather only the baseline cost data that's critical for funding eligibility. And to minimize your administrative burden, we've partnered with MSW Consultants and Crow LLP, which are 2 California-based companies, in order to do this analysis. Both firms will directly support your teams through the process, making it straightforward and manageable. Your cooperation in providing detailed cost data now will ensure accurate, fair reimbursement later. So why is the payment mechanism, go ahead, you can forward it. So why is the payment mechanism important for your company? First, the goal of the mechanism is to ensure that you each receive fair and full compensation for eligible costs. It will ensure that you receive direct funding for all net new and additional costs incurred due to SB54 without having to pass those costs on to your customers. Second, and importantly, it protects your existing local contracts. Your current franchise agreements remain protected under PRC 40059B, meaning that your existing contracts won't change. And CA is very aware of that. In developing the methodology, that is one of the boundaries and one of the fundamental core recognitions in creating all these methodologies. And finally, SB54 supports new investments and services without placing the cost burden on your company. Next slide, Katie. So eligible costs to be funded fall under a couple of broad categories, each of which are crucial to meeting SB54 obligations. First, collection and processing costs. These could mean expanding collection routes or frequency of routes, adding new materials to your recycling streams, or upgrading sorting and processing equipment. It covers, the cost will cover both operating expense or capital expenses as well as operating expenses, increases in those. Then second, infrastructure and system improvements. Funding can cover MRF upgrades, sorting technology improvements, or enhanced transportation logistics. And finally, education and administrative costs. Producer-funded reimbursement will cover public outreach, ratepayer education campaigns, and compliance-related reporting. Again, the eligible costs will be for both operating as well as capital expenses. So this slide shows how the funding process is designed to operate smoothly and efficiently. The first one is going to be the application for funding. And likely that will be done through, in most cases, through an online portal for efficiency and ease. Next, evaluation and assessment. CAA will evaluate the applications against clear, transparent criteria. So before you fill out the application, you're going to know what the criteria is for evaluating that application. Next, the next step is a formal agreement, which will specify performance expectations and reporting obligations. And then finally, once conditions are met and payment terms are in place, timely payment will be able to be done according to those agreements. So mechanisms will likely vary slightly between projects that are initiated between 2023 and 2026 versus those planned for 2027 and beyond. And CAA is currently in the process of developing the payment mechanism and the methodology for payment, which we'll be discussing further in a webinar in the fall. So why is CAA developing this? So we get this question a lot, a 2022 baseline. So according to the regulations, costs before January 1st, 2023 aren't eligible for funding under SB54, making 2022 the ideal baseline year for accurate comparisons. So developing reliable baseline data will help avoid potential misunderstanding for funding problems down the line. The analysis that MSW and CRO are working on will ensure that your company's cost increases and funding will scale accordingly, capturing the true financial impact of SB54. So at the end of the day, to determine appropriate compensation for system investments, we need to establish that clear baseline. In this case, that's the cost of delivering the relevant service prior to the changes that any changes made starting in January 1st, 2023. The baseline allows us to assess incremental cost incurred due to SB54 and to confirm what should be compensated and by how much. So to accomplish this, CAA has partnered with leading industry consultants for this project. As I mentioned, we've got RRS is leading the overall data collection and program strategy for CAA. MSW Consultants is managing the collection cost data from jurisdictions and service providers, and CRO LLP is analyzing detailed MRF processing costs as well as collection costs. These teams are not here just to collect data and gather data, but to provide ongoing support and guidance throughout the process. So it truly is intended to be a hands-on approach to really make it as easy for you as possible, understanding the burdens that you all have on your time, really trying to make it as easy as we can. So as I said earlier, we're hoping that this is just the beginning of the work with this team. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Davis to introduce his company, MSW Consultants, and the work that they're doing as part of the SB54 cost analysis project.
All right. Thank you, Susan. I'm David Davis. I'm the president and founder of MSW Consultants. We're a solid waste consulting firm located in Southern California, and we provide cost accounting, economic, and public policy advice to local governments. We provided solid waste consulting service to over 100 jurisdictions, mainly in California. And our role in developing the covered cost methodology and payment mechanism is to gather information about the 2022 cost of recycling collection. And to do that, we're looking at two parts, a quantitative part and a qualitative part. And the quantitative part, and I'll show you some of the instruments we're using in a minute, but I want to talk about them first. The quantitative part includes the actual cost of collection. And to do that, we're gathering data for all costs, including the cost of collecting trash, recyclables, organics, and in some cases where jurisdictions collect mixed materials, like they put recyclables and trash in the same container. And you may wonder, well, if we're looking at only the cost of recycling, why are we gathering information about the cost of trash collection, organics, and mixed? And the reason for that is we don't want to look at the cost of collecting recyclables in a silo. If we can gather the information about collecting all these materials, it enables us to evaluate the reasonableness of the cost of recycling and evaluate them in the context of that total collection system. And in addition to the cost information, the annual cost per year to, for labor, materials, processing cost, disposal cost, we're also going to be asking for operational data, including the number of stops, the number of cubic yards, routes, and tons. And we're going to be using that information to calculate some key performance indicators that will help us evaluate the reasonableness, the internal consistency of the data we're collecting. And then the second part of it is a policy and regulatory survey. We realize that there are certain factors and circumstances that influence the cost of recycling. So we've designed a brief survey. It covers 10 topics about variable rates and different policies like revenue sharing of recyclables to gather some information about the policy part of it. And then finally, I wanted to talk about the 167 jurisdictions that we've selected. We're not surveying all the jurisdictions in California. We've only chosen a representative sample of 167. And the way we chose these jurisdictions is based on a spread of population density. We looked at where they're located in the state, and we tried to pick a cross-section of jurisdictions that have public service, private haulers, and also hybrid systems where you have maybe the residential is provided by the jurisdiction and the commercial is open competition. And the way that we're kind of dividing up this work, MSW is responsible for the collection cost operations, but Crow is assisting us, and they're going to be gathering information from about 56 jurisdictions mainly in Northern California, and we're going to be gathering the other 111 mainly in Central and Southern California. So with that, I'd like to just show you, if you could go to the next slide, the survey instruments that we're going to be working from. This is the cost data acquisition form, and you can see that we're gathering information for single family, multifamily, and commercial. We are not gathering information about roll-off. And what this shows is the annual cost of providing trash, recyclables, organics, and in some cases, mixed collection service. I also wanted to show you that we're asking for a profit line item down there. And the reason we're asking for that is because when we eventually design a reimbursement methodology, not only are recycling service providers going to be reimbursed for their incremental cost, they're going to be reimbursed for their cost plus a reasonable profit. And then if you can show the next slide is just an example of the container information that we're going to be gathering. And this is going to enable us to evaluate the internal consistency of the information and also use this information when it's combined to extrapolate recycling costs to jurisdictions that are not part of the sample. And on the next slide, next couple of slides, we've got the regulatory and policy part of our survey. And as you can see, I think with these two slides, if you can go to the next slide, we're just covering 10 topics, and it's all multiple choice. And it's important information for us, but we're just trying to keep it as simple as possible. So that kind of summarizes the collection cost data program. I'm going to turn it over to Jason Chan at Crow right now to talk about the MRF cost collection effort. Jason?
Thanks, Dave. Hi, everyone. Jason Chan, Senior Manager with Crow. Crow is a nationwide CPA consulting firm. We specialize in cost of recycling with experience in California, Oregon, Colorado, and New York. Our California team is primarily based out of our Sacramento and San Francisco offices. I'm joined today with my colleagues Wendy Pratt and Eric Nyland. The objective of the MRF cost interview, so this is the second component of the work that CA is putting on right now. The objective is to collect baseline costs for processing recyclables to inform the payment mechanism. So essentially, we're looking at the same baseline 2022 as the collection cost survey, but for processing. So for key activities that we're conducting right now is first bullets we've completed is defining and validating cost criteria for MRFs, which include 15 cost categories, things like labor, benefits, depreciation, as well as profit. And also we identified key cost drivers, such as the number and types of staff and equipment that will help drive those costs. And we'll have essentially NDA templates ready and ready to work with you upon request if that's necessary. We'll then reach out and schedule calls to collect MRF costs and operational data and develop cost models based on that data. And so after we developed a draft model based on your facility, so we'll have a separate model for each facility. We'll validate some of those outputs with you all. In terms of which facilities are in scope, these are commingled recyclables processing facilities, or MRFs, currently operating or operated since at least 2022. So for sample facilities, so of the 85 to 90 MRFs across the state, we're interviewing approximately 45 MRFs, so about 50% of the population there. Really a representative mix between public-private and private facilities across certain things like the 5 CalRecycle regions, small, medium, large facilities, whether it's single, dual, or mixed waste MRF. So, those 3 main criteria were used to make sure that our 50% sample is representative to the entire state of California. Kind of similar to the collection survey, because we're only sampling 50% of the MRFs, we're going to be using the data that we have from that 45 facilities to calculate the, estimate the cost for the remaining 45 facilities. So how data will be collected is through a 2-hour virtual interview. We say virtual interview, but we are open to, going into your facility in person if you'd prefer that, to do it in an interview in person. We're open to be flexible on how we gather your information. Different from the collection cost survey, we're not issuing a questionnaire or a survey to you all. Rather, we'll be collecting our data through an interview process where we want to understand your 2022 costs and things that drive those costs. Any key changes beyond 2022 to date. Essentially, the payment mechanism kind of comes into play starting January 1, 2023. So we want to understand what you have done in terms of anything that could be related to SB54, and then as well as any anticipated changes that you may make in preparation to the launch of SB54 by January 1, 2027. Obviously, that could be things like, different types of equipment that you're purchasing, but also at the same time, want to understand, if you are automating some of your line, we want to see if there are any staffing changes that go along with it. So want to get a full picture of the changes going forward. In terms of interview topics, these are some examples that we'll run through during our interview process. Things like facility type, just want to confirm your, single, dual, mixed waste facility, your tonnages, your residual rates, percentages, the number and types of staff, kind of average wages or range of wages and salaries and benefits. Number and types of equipment, whether you lease or own any of the equipment that you use, how old and are each of those equipment and the associated depreciation. We'll also ask about energy use, which is primarily going to be electricity for facilities. Want to understand also maintenance, how much time you spend on maintenance versus repairs. And how much downtime that might have been as a result of that. Outbound freight, so this transportation from either from the MRF to a landfill. So I want to understand the tipping fees and kind of hauling distances and locations, as well as to end markets, whether you are transporting the bales yourself or a third party is transporting it for you to the end market. Want to also understand administrative overhead allocation. This is primarily like corporate overhead, where you have a centralized location where accounting, HR might occur that gets allocated to your facility based on revenue, headcount, or another method. We also want to understand your insurance, workers' comp, facility insurance, liability, things like that. And again, we'll want to make sure we understand any major changes since 2022 and any anticipated changes related to SB54. So who should attend interviews? So we identified 2 types of roles that we recommend having in each interview to kind of avoid any follow-up calls that we might need. Is a facility operations or general manager, as well as a facility or regional finance or accounting officer. So to capture both kind of the cost components as well as the operational components of the interview. And one important note is that we understand this information is sensitive. We'll work with you to use what makes the most sense for your facility, your operations, your company, and make things as easy as possible. Right at the end of the day, the data that we'll be using from this interview process will directly inform CAA's payment mechanism as SB54 is rolled out. So super important. And thank you again for your participation in this process. And with that, I'll go ahead and kick it over to my colleague, Wendy, to go over confidentiality.
Thank you, Jason. And good morning, everybody. Again, thanks for attending. I just wanted to touch on a couple items related to non-disclosure agreements. And again, I think we've been reiterating, we recognize this is a big ask for you. It's, we believe, an important part of this SB54 process in making the law effective and supporting recycling and recycling infrastructure. So, we know we're asking a lot. We have extensive infrastructure and processes in place. As Crow is an accounting consulting firm, we are well versed in obtaining confidential information. We have a share file system to securely upload individual passwords into individual password protected into a folder for confidential information. So those processes are well in place. We also have non-disclosure agreements. We've used these in Oregon and California and other areas for obtaining cost of recycling information. And also, I think importantly, the information is going to be aggregated. So we're ultimately developing models, one for the cost of collection, one for the cost of processing, that will be leveraging the information that the sample facilities provide and the various criteria that drive costs in those areas. That information is going to be aggregated and then anonymized. Your individual information may support your own reimbursement, but that's a separate process. The modeling, the way the cost data will be used to the non-sample facilities is going to be aggregated across various characteristics of the MRFs. So just wanted to touch on those items, and then I will hand it back to Susan.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Jason, and thanks, Wendy. So why should you participate in the survey? I think you've heard some compelling reasons along the way, but just a couple of things. This particular initiative delivers direct and tangible benefits to your company. And I really, it's sometimes hard to see that, but definitely this is a funding mechanism shift, and it reduces the financial risk of the investments for you that will be required for SB54 compliance. CAA will cover new capital and operational costs required for the law. CAA also will be covering new educational and outreach requirements and administrative costs. It allows continuous improvements in recycling infrastructure and services without local race or placing financial burdens on your residents. And we all know how difficult it is for any sort of rate increase in any community. And then it allows your company to operate competitively by leveling the playing field on those new costs required by SB54. So we hope you can kind of see the positive side and really the benefits of this system and the process, and very much in particular, this assessment that's being done. Participation in the survey will ensure that you have a voice in the process and are able to take full advantage of the significant funding opportunities that SB54 will create for your company and for your customers, quite frankly. So before I turn it over back to Katie to open the lines for some Q&A, I'd like to just talk a little bit about the timeline. Where are we? Looking ahead. So for the rest of this month through August, we'll be conducting the surveys and the interviews, and hoping that you will have some time to participate in those. In September, we'll complete the data analysis. And then in October and November, we'll be conducting consultations to define the draft reimbursement methodology. So we'll be soliciting input and feedback on the methodology itself. And then in December, we'll finalize those, make some revisions, and then have a public review process in January and February. And all of this then goes back and feeds into the program plan that will be due to CalRecycle in mid-2026. So your involvement today sets the foundation for a fair, transparent reimbursement process for years to come. So finally, one last thing, we're going to be at CRA in Monterey in August. And if you're there, please let us know if you'd like to meet. We have some space set aside and we'd love to schedule some time to meet with you. So Katie, I'll turn it over to you to kind of kick us off with the Q&A.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you to all the presenters today. So yeah, let's open up the floor for questions now. Feel free to continue using the chat function or go ahead and use the raise hand function. I see we already have a hand raised, which is great. And just a reminder, we will be circulating the webinar materials following the end of the session. And here's our contact information if you prefer to follow up with us offline. So Susan, I will turn back to you to proctor the Q&A. Thank you.
Okay, I see Veronica, you've got your hand up. You're first. I think you can, yeah, there you go.
Hi. Yes, good morning, everyone. Veronica Pardo, Resource Recovery Coalition of California. Going back to one of the first slides, could you expand a little bit more on the cost reimbursement process where you mentioned the performance metrics? Is there more information you could provide to us? I don't
Yeah,
know what number it was.
Performance-based metrics. I know that's been something you've seen in slides, and I will tell you, we have right now the methodology effort is being developed, and I think one of the first orders of business will be to define just what that looks like, and I think that will be one of those elements that we will be bringing up for more feedback as we move ahead. We have had feedback that that's a sensitive topic. I think one could look at it in different ways, whether it's performance-based for tonnage, for contract requirements. I think that's something we need to have a very clear definition around that we will then make sure to socialize to get some feedback. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yep. And I do think, again, I'll say kind of along those lines, as this is really intended to be a opening for more dialogue and feedback. We've talked about in the next month or so to come back again to service providers to kind of pressure test where we're going with this. So we don't want this to be kind of one way, and we don't want it to only be one conversation. We would like to be able to have ongoing conversations to make sure that we're getting your feedback along the way. And again, I'll go back to one of the keys is, once this gets going in a year and a half, it's only 5 years for implementation. So the goal will be to make these investments and to make them facilitate them as easily and efficiently as possible so that we can assure that we're meeting those 2032 goals. And this will be one of the ways to do that, to do this work here now so that we've kind of got the systems in place to be able to kind of come out of the block strong, moving towards really a strong implementation to meet the goals of SB54 on time. We've got plenty of time for other questions or comments that you might have. We welcome them either in the chat or if you want to raise your hand, either way is okay.
I've never known this group to be this shy before.
And we'll take feedback if there are things that you found helpful, things that are, you're looking for more information on, that will be helpful as well. Give it another minute or so before we call it a day. and you see here our contacts. So if you have questions you want to follow up on outside of this situation, this group, this webinar, please, you'll get this information, you'll get the deck. Please reach out and we'll make sure that we are engaging to follow up and answer any questions that you may have. Well, Katie, maybe I'll turn it back to you.
All right, well, thank you everybody for attending. We really appreciate your feedback and your questions and your attention today. Like Susan mentioned, we will be following up with this webinar content, and if you have anything you'd like to discuss offline, feel free to contact us. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.